Okay, we are on filmsgonewild.com and we are going to talk to Ashley O'Shea about her movie Unapologetic, which is going to be the first Film Festival Day screening for 2021. So, Ashley, welcome to Films Gone Wild.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks,
So,
John.
hey, I was excited to talk to you about the film because, man, obviously it's uh, when you make a film like this, it's going to be timely. But following what
hmm
Stacey Abrams pulled off in Georgia, it's like resonating so much, and I think it will to people.
hmm
Uh, so congratulations on the film, first off.
Thank you.
And what I want to start off with is I want to talk about your approach to this film because
hmm
you could have gone a few different directions. You could have gone in a much more personal direction. You could have gone to a much more overreaching, kind of political landscape with it.
hmm
But I think you effectively worked a good balance between the two. And I
hmm
would love for you to talk about what your approach was.
Yeah, it definitely was not tied up in a bow as nicely as we were going through the process of making it. But yeah, when I initially started the project, it was a very monumental time in Chicago, not only around the case around Rekia Boyd's killing, but also around the killing of Laquan McDonald and all of the young Black people that were organizing so diligently, especially in those first couple of years from like 2015 and 2016. So initially, I just wanted to capture that energy. And I think we were first approaching it very much so from a top down sort of view, thinking that we would kind of give a little dose of every like organization and a few different organizers from different groups. But as we were kind of moving along and I started building relationships, more close relationships with Janae and Bella, it became clear that people were resonating more with their two personal stories. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and started to look at it as a more character-driven story that can be, through their intimate experiences, even though it's just following their lives, it's so indicative of so many other people that are in the movement for Black lives. So once we kind of did that and decided to just hone in on what they were going through over those 4.5 years, then we brought back all of the kind of more broader landscape stuff that you see in the film. But yeah, it felt a little too not it didn't pack the punch that we wanted it to when we were kind of just trying to tread lightly around the topic. So we just dove in and here we are today.
Well, oftentimes, especially with a film like this, where there are so many variables that are literally happening as you're filming,
Mm-hmm.
that you can sometimes start to make one movie, and then it turns into another movie, and then even sometimes when you get into the editing bay, and you're whittling down all this footage, and you're mapping it out, it can come in, it can become a third movie. Talk about that challenge for you as a filmmaker to hone that.
Mm-hmm. It was a big challenge. This was my first feature-length film, so I think I had a lot of short experience with making shorts, but not something 90 minutes or longer. And for a good chunk of the production process, we were editing the film and the scenes as we were shooting them, to try to kind of stay one step ahead of the action. But I think that when we finally kind of made the decision to go full force for like 4 or 5 months at the end of 2019, that's when the story really started to take shape. Because I think even if while we were editing the scenes as production was going along, we still weren't getting like the we weren't getting the overarching view of the story arc. And really figuring out how our characters got from A to B over that course of time. And so we had a lot of assemblies and rough cuts that were, 2 hours long, that I literally just threw it all up on the wall, or my editor threw it all up on the wall. And, it was just too much to take in a lot of times. People go through a lot in 4 years. And even within the movement for Black Lives, like what was happening, there were other things that were happening in Chicago that we just weren't able to include because it didn't serve the story.
Right.
So we kind of just had a come to Jesus moment, if you will, had a story meeting and really talked about like, what do we want to focus on with Janae and Bella's story, and how does the Chicago story kind of integrate within that, instead of trying to like force their lives into what's happening in Chicago. We kind of did the reverse. And I think, that ended up working for us really well.
Well, let's talk about Janae and Bella for a moment, because they're both dynamic in their own way. They are really two wonderful characters to kind of hang your hopes on, so to speak, with the film. Was it always going to be the two of them, or did you start with a few others as well and then whittle down to them? How did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be Janae, because she was the first person in the movement that I reached out to that said yes. And initially, I really was just thinking I was going to make a short piece about her first year in her PhD program, while also organizing with Black Youth Project 100. And then, so many things happened over those 3 months. And I started to talk to more community organizers. And kind of at the top of that next year, I just started to interview a lot of different women within the movement, more informational. And this was more, I was thinking that we were going to do like the broad stroke approach. But I kind of met Bella in the process of that, and her energy was just so captivating. And I really liked that she was from Chicago, from the West Side, and kind of had this whole history of working in the community. And as I started to kind of just do multiple shoots with more characters, I just kept going back to Janae and Bella. And I think that there certainly could have been 3, 4, 5 characters in this film if we wanted, but to be honest, I was doing a lot of the work of directing, producing, and shooting the film in the first year of doing it. So it just was not, also like capacity wise, it just was impossible. So I kind of see it as it was kind of a happy accident somewhat, because of that. But I do think it ended up being the two featured subjects that it was meant to be, because I think they balance each other so well, and they have different approaches and different passions and where they want to go with their careers. But I think there was a lot of overlap in there as well. So yeah, that's kind of how that came to be.
Well, and one of the things that I really loved about the movie is how it puts you on that ground level in the homes and in the heads of the people who are activists, and the people that are doing the heavy lifting, with Facebook and you see countless people debating, and they're and they're vocally on social media, Twitter as well. They are putting out their opinions, and and they are supporting oftentimes the good fight, as it were. But what I loved about this is that it kind of took away and it takes away a lot of that idea of, well, what is really activism? Other than we see someone talking into a bullhorn, we see people leading a chant as they're walking down the street, but we don't see people stenciling signs, and we don't see
Mhm.
people making phone call after phone call and to round up people and get them in.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Talk about having the camera in those rooms, and and if your eyes were opened to that.
Yeah, definitely. I did not have a lot of experience within the Chicago organizing scene when I started the film. I did a little bit of activism in college, but it was, it was college, so it was a different it was just a different experience, being in Chicago, which a lot of people call the birthplace of community organizing. I knew that I had a high learning curve to understand what was going on. And also a lot of the groups that I was following in the film, they were within like their first 5 years of existence. So they were also learning and growing a lot within that time period. But on based on my experience, I really just learned how much they dedicate their lives to this movement. Like eat, sleep, breathe community organizing. Sometimes not for pay. Sometimes like with Janae, while also doing coursework for a PhD program. And that was something that we felt was really important to portray, because I think there's also this perception that organizers are a monolith, and that they all have the same ideals, and that they just kind of like crop up in public space without any type of intention or approach. What I was seeing was a very strategic, intentional approach on behalf of community organizers here in Chicago. And I also wanted people to understand that it isn't always about, the protests or events. Sometimes it's about an intimate conversation you're having with your friend about your sexuality, or, how your mom was affected by seeing the work that you were doing. So I wanted those moments to kind of, excuse me, to kind of portray that as well, because that's movement work too. It doesn't always have to be galvanizing hundreds and hundreds of people. Like sometimes it's within your own home. And so, Janae and Bella are just like two very unique examples of that. And hopefully when people watch the film, they understand that this is a very taxing thing for somebody to do. And at the same time, they also have other passions, and they have families, and they just have other things going on as well. And to hopefully build that compassion, or that desire to want to connect to the movement with that new understanding.
Well, and that leads me to the last question that I wanted to ask you. And I usually focus on filmmaking for the most part, with the
Mm-hmm.
interviews we do on here. But this, again, because of what just happened in Georgia, also, it just highlighted, something that I think about. I've read a little, some people have commented on, and that's, the idea of, in a lot of ways right now, uh, it seems as though, African American women are
Mm-hmm.
leading the charge politically, in so many of these uh, grassroots fights across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And and in your film, in Unapologetic, there's also the moment, where where you have a few people talking about the fact that, they're at an event, they're at a
Mm-hmm.
protest, and dudes take the mic, and
Mm-hmm.
and they're, and they go to the forefront, and it's like, no, we've got to balance this, and we've got to give
Mm-hmm.
due. It's like, Stacey Abrams, she needs her due, and Bell and
Yeah.
Janae need their due. So
Yeah.
I would just love to hear your opinion of, through making this, like, and just in general, why do you think that is? Why is it that we have that women of color
Mm-hmm.
seem to have to lead this goddamn charge every time?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that we live in a patriarchal society, and that is that spreads across the board from community organizing to filmmaking to so many things. But for me personally, part of why I wanted to make this film is because I knew that I had not learned enough about Black women that have been community organizers, not just, in my lifetime, but, during the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. I'd always heard inklings that Black women were very heavily involved, but that was not what I was receiving in my formal education. And so it was partially, I was really like looking to research and learn more about women like Ella Baker and Ida B. Wells, and people that were working hand in hand with men like MLK and Malcolm X, and just were not the ones that were being presented at the forefront. Sometimes didn't want to be presented at the forefront, but in that same token, I think that was creating an undue burden and a misunderstanding around what women are here to do. Black women specifically, a lot of times are the caretakers of not just their nuclear family, but their entire community. And that for me was something I had always seen growing up with my mom and my aunts and people just in my community. So I think, it's within this legacy of Black women that have gone before us that we are often, feel the pressure to galvanize community and to push for these larger shifts. But I also think we just understand the power of working on the ground level. And we understand that we have, a tenderness and care about us that isn't always seen from the male perspective. And so I can't say specifically why we're the ones that always have to save everyone else. And I really hope what my big wish for Black women specifically is that we're able to just rest, because I think, it's an undue burden and it's one that needs to be spread across many different communities and identities. And so I'm also hoping as people watch this film that, they look at how they can get involved, where they're at in their community, what's going on, how to tap into that and support that. Because Stacey Abrams didn't do it all by herself. She had a lot of other Black women, a lot of other people in the community that, led to that victory. And so it just goes to show you how much more of an impact we can have when other people are in the fray with us.
Well, listen, I think you did, Janae and Bella, a service with this film, and as a debut feature, I think you kicked all kinds of ass with putting this thing together. I'm serious. I'm serious.
You.
There's one thing to turn a camera on and just record shit that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and there's another with mapping it out and give us a coherent story to keep us, giving a damn about our characters and about what's going on. And you did that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Again, the film is Unapologetic, and it's going to be the first after a really nice film festival tour. It's going to be the first film festival day screening tomorrow, Saturday. And again, Ashley, it's been great talking to you.
You too, John. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.